One thing you must know to improve your project communication. My name is Guilherme and I'm a project management specialist. I help professionals to become successful project managers. Well, first of all, why communication? Well, projects are made by people, and so communicating with them it's very important. So you need to communicate with your team, you need to communicate with your managers, with your leadership, you need to communicate with your suppliers, you need to communicate with your customer. And always communication is one of the top challenges where you face that you face in projects, and that can be all kinds of reasons for that because sometimes what is said is not fully understood. So communication is essential for your project. Without a good communication, you are going to have problems with your leadership skills, your team management skills, with your stakeholder management skills, managing your customer, and even achieving your project goal. Why? Because if people do not understand what's the goal of the project, they cannot achieve it. Like think about like you're taking a taxi and you just enter the taxi and the taxi driver asks you, where do you want to go? And you don't say anything, say, I'm not going to tell you, just go. The chances are that you are never going to reach your destination. Or if you do, will take much longer, it will be much more expensive. So a clear communication is very important to have a successful project. And therefore it's very important for you to be a successful project manager. And of course, every time I talk about communication, there are several different factors that can influence communication, like culture involved, like communication in different countries, they're different. For example, the way people communicate with their managers in Brazil, for example, it's very different from the way people communicate with their managers here in the Netherlands. Because of the culture of the country, it's quite different. So you must be aware of that. And one of the facts that is also a scientific fact that I really want to approach and talk about it more today is what's called the curse of the knowledge. First, explaining you what's the curse of the knowledge. Well, of course, curse of the knowledge is cognitive bias that basically occurs when someone tries to communicate something with others because you already have some information in the background, and then you assume that also the other people have this information, and this information is essential to helping their understanding. That's also known as curse of expertise. A lot of fancy words, but I try to make these simple in a visual way. Basically, what does that mean? Well, if this is basically what you know about your project, so you as your project manager, probably you're one of the person that knows most about your project. So you know this entire world here, this entire circle here. And the thing is, your stakeholders, they are not following the day-to-day of your project. So they just basically, they just know a piece, or they just have a piece of knowledge that you have about your project. And how does it make it important, and how does it is connected with the curse of knowledge? Well, let me give you about more background on the curse of knowledge. This is started by, I think, with a study that they did in the 70s, if I remember well. And here I'm telling you stuff by memory, so I might if you read about that, there might be some things. Of course, my mind is playing tricks on me. That might be some cognitive bias that I have, and I just know. But talking about the experiment, they just select few songs that everyone would know, like Happy Birthday, and they ask people to tap it, and they ask someone else to listen and try to guess the song they were tapping. Well, when the people they were tapping it, they were guessing, say, oh, that's going to be at least 50-50, meaning that maybe there's 50% chance they are going to get it, and then 50% they are not going to get it. In reality, this rate was much lower. If I remember well, here I'm saying again, top of my mind, that it was even below 30% the rate that people they were guessing correctly the songs. And when they said that to the tapper, they would never understand that. Why? Because once they had this information, once they had this song in their mind, and they start to tap it, it was almost impossible to them to understand why the other people could not see that. And that, of course, in that experiment, they call this the curse of knowledge, because there was so obvious to them, because their knowledge or their expertise or knowledge, it was the information, it was an assumption that it was obvious and everyone could guess that. But in reality, the other part, they did not have all the information that you're saying, or they did not see all the obvious things, or at least that the person was calling as obvious, and that was why the mismatch was so big. Well, you can imagine that's quite relevant in information on your project, because first, the obvious is not self-evident. That's also a quote that's very interesting there, because, or Sherlock Holmes would say, there's nothing more deceptive than the obvious fact, because in reality, what's obvious depends on your background in information, but also depends on your focus, how people see different things, then how they see the different things, even though the level of information might be similar, that has a lot of with their mindset, their background, how they grow, and a lot of other things that can influence in the communication there. So basically, for you, coming back to your project, so when you're explaining your project, or when you're explaining something, you as a project manager, you have basically this full understanding your project, because you have been working on that every day for sometimes years. You have been discussing with different people, have been discussing with stakeholders, we have been discussing with customers, and that means that you have a lot of different perspectives. The thing is, most of the times it's only you, the project manager, that has this information. So when you are communicating with your team, you should never make the assumption that they understand that we are talking about. Why? Because even the things that are obvious for you, they are not going to be obvious for your team, for your customer, for your stakeholders. An example here that happens, and that's what, of course, why understanding the curse of knowledge can really improve your communication in your project. Every time I'm working a project, I discuss the timeline with my team. Of course, what I do, I create a first draft, first plan, then I sit together with my team to talk about things. And I try to make as clear as possible, and I try to open even MS Project to show everyone what I'm doing. But what I've noted a lot of times happen, because this is the curse of knowledge of the project manager, and also my own curse of knowledge, because usually before those meetings, I worked on the timeline for maybe a few hours, or sometimes depending on the time, the size of the timeline, even for days when I'm doing these reviews and when the project is progressing. I have the critical path very clear in my mind, and how the connections, why they happen like that. And when I mention to the team, for example, oh, you finished the design here, then we are going, for example, we are going to release a tool, kick off a tool, then we get the components that we need and go to assembly. And not everyone can see that very straightforward. And not everyone will see directly, for example, okay, if you delay the design, then you are going to delay your delivery. And that might sound strange, because, of course, if you're a project manager, as I am a project manager, that might be obvious. Say, if you are delaying the critical path, you're going to delay your project. Not all the people have this understanding. First, not all the people understand what's a critical path. Not all the people will know what's the critical path for the project, and not all the people will know all the critical path steps there, or all the critical path tasks or chain, if you want to call, that will lead to that. So what I do in those situations, I also try to explain the critical path for the project, and also I try to explain also why I made those connections like that, and why I'm telling you what I'm doing with the timeline, because what I do that because I do understand the curse of knowledge. So also having those pre-discussions with your team before you have a meeting with a customer, before you need to present, for example, your review board, helps you to avoid the curse of knowledge. Because sometimes you create, for example, a slide, and you think that's so obvious that no one could not understand that. Which in reality, about when you talk about communication, it's not usually the case. Remember the experiment where people were tapping like happy birthday and they say it's not possible this person is not understanding it. In reality, it is. And there's a chance that you are going to do that. So more that you are aware of the curse of knowledge, you avoid this pitfall and this trap that people are not understanding. And so when you realize that the curse of knowledge is there, what can you do to avoid it? Well, you can show something like if you are doing a presentation, show it to someone that does not have the full background of your project. Show you for one of your team members. And I know that you're going to say, yeah, but some of your team members, they know almost as well as the project as you, which is great. It's great to have those people there. But I can guarantee to you that not all people will be at the same par of information there. So it's very important to you to show to them. And you get feedback. And if you say, is that clear for you? Is that reasonable? Is that understanding? When I present like that, what message that do you get? You can ask, when you present something like that, you can ask, do you have questions? Is that clear? Try to ask open questions, not yes or no questions. And always ask feedback. Why? Because if you do something there, there's a big chance that because you have the curse of knowledge, and again, this is a cognitive bias, and there's plenty of cognitive bias out there, which I'm not going to explain this because, of course, not my goal here. But understanding those cognitive bias always help you to improve your communication. If you improve your communication, if you're more clear, more concise, it will help you to better manage your stakeholders. So it helps in your stakeholder management, will better help you to communicate with your customer, will better help you to communicate with your leaders, and will help you also to progress your career. Because when people see you communicating things clearly and effective, that also show, oh, this person knows what he or she is doing. This person has the control from what he's doing. And might be that also open possibilities for promotions and so on. And keep in mind then this curse of knowledge. So every time you're presenting with your team and discuss that, ask questions, but also in the other way around. Because you have the curse of knowledge, but also all your team members, they are going to have the curse of knowledge. For example, I believe it was a few weeks ago, I was discussing tests for one of my products, and it was my test engineer that was presenting something. And of course, he also has the curse of knowledge. Why? Because he created all the test procedures. He sees all the data. And sometimes he was saying something, and I was just, oh, can you rephrase that? Let me see if I understand. Then I would repeat something in my own words. And I'll ask them, does it make sense? Is that what you want to say that? Because what I'm doing here, I'm trying to close the gap from the communication. So you always have, if you're talking about communication, you have a channel, meaning that's in this case was myself and my test engineer. And you also have a sender and a receiver. That's very technical to say that. But you basically what I'm trying to say, you always have someone saying something and you always have someone that in theory it's listening, hopefully it's listening to get the information. So if you make sure that at least you are in a conversation, you have a receiver and you have a listener really listening, not just going sounds and not processing everything, but you have the person listening, then it's a first step. But then you need to be aware that you have all those kinds of cognitive bias there, and you also have all those different aspects of the communication about background that will influence in the message that you are saying. And it can be a lot of different aspects there. But when you're using and when you start to be aware at least of some of them, because there are a lot of them, that's why communication is not straightforward. You can have barriers for the language. Sometimes you say something, you're kind of translating something that you would say in your own native, no, your native language, but like in English, that sounds a bit different. You have intonation and a lot of other stuff. But just by being aware of those things, that means that like if you're aware of problems, if you're aware of certain type of challenges, then you can actively work to solve them, or at least to minimize the impact of that. And that's why it's important to understand this curse of knowledge here, that again you have it and all your team members have it, and also your managers were going to have it. Because a lot of times you might have like a director and he's telling you something that you say, but that does not make sense. Well, the fact is he has a lot of more information about a lot of different things that might be in the background from what he's trying to tell you. You just don't know that. So he might be telling you something that's obvious, that's self-evident, but for you it's not like that. And I'm pretty sure you as a receiver of information, you've been in that situation before, where people say something and for them it's something very kind, it's obvious, and if you say, but that does not make any type of sense for me. And if you're communicating with people, I guess that also you've been both sides, that you are saying something that obvious, but also what that people don't get it. And that's they call the curse of knowledge. So your job, now that you know that there's a curse of knowledge, that there's already this bias there, that everyone has it, and I'm not saying that's only you, it's me and everyone else in the world, because that's related in how the brain works. You can start to work to make sure that you can close those gaps. You can make those bridges to make sure that your communication is properly delivered. And one of the things that's I always mention that, but for communication, but that also goes for everything else. Don't make assumptions. So don't assume that the other part is understanding what you're saying. You can always ask, do you know what I mean? Is it clear what I'm trying to say? Or let me just, you can ask this question. Help me here to make sure that I'm communicating this clearly to you. Can you tell me what did you understand from what I just said? And based on their answers, then you can further investigate. If they say, okay, I think that's what you mean, say, okay, that's clear. They get information. Or if they mention something that you say, no, that's not clear enough, try to explain this in different angles. And this is also one of the nicest things, like when I'm teaching project management. And one of the things that why I like to do it. Well, because I am an expert in project management. So if I'm going to explain project management to someone that has zero knowledge on that, I need to find ways to overcome my own curse of knowledge. Because for some of those stuff, I've been doing that for more than 13 years. Then for me, it's almost obvious, or it automatically is to my brain going like that. But of course, not that I'm much better or smarter than someone else, but someone that has never seen that will not see in the same way than I. Then, because then I'm aware of this curse of knowledge, I need to find ways to close this gap. And of course, when I'm working on those different ways to close this gap, it ends up that I get much more knowledge and much more understanding of the subject I'm trying to explain. Because something is that you need to explain for someone that's a specialist. Like if you go for a doctor, that's a specialist of I don't know, in fractures in hands, for example. If they see your X-ray, they can tell it right away what's going on there. But if it's for me, I see the X-ray, I don't see anything there. Because I don't have the training, I do not have the experience, I do not have the knowledge. Then the doctor would need to explain to me what's going on there. And that's exactly the same thing that happens when you are a teacher and you need to find ways to explain it. But in this process, you learn a lot. And I can tell you that if you start to take this curse of knowledge, if you understand the curse of knowledge, and you all make the first step, acknowledge that this is there, and then you try to take additional steps to overcome this gap, that will make a big difference into your communication in your project. Because then you're going to use all those types of questions that can help you there to bring different understanding, different background, and you make sure that those people are at the level of the information they need to be, the level of understanding that they need to be. Again, going back to the taxi driver analogy, if you enter the taxi, you just say, that's my address. Of course, this is more old days. Nowadays, you just put something in the app and they already know that what's the address. But that's how it happened in the old days, or depending if you still take a taxi in the streets, like, I don't know, some cities that's not very normal, but if some other places still are very normal. But what you're going to do there? You're going to tell you exactly the address that you want to be. Then you're going to make the clear information for this person to go there. And of course, nowadays they just put it there in the GPS, and the GPS will set a route to make sure you get there as soon and as fast as possible. It works exactly in the same way. And I can tell you, even if you do that, you're going to find challenges in the communication. Just going back to the analogy of the taxi, few years ago I was visiting Chicago, the United States. Then I used an app. I think I was with Uber or a taxi or whatever, but I ordered through an app. Then I just put the address that I want to go, and then we were almost there, half of block there, and I told the taxi driver, there's where I want to be. And the taxi driver started discussing with me, no, that's not your destination, because the GPS is showing something else. And I was telling him, but there is where I want to be. And of course, the only reason why I was arguing with the taxi driver is because it was raining a lot. And this guy started saying, no, here's the right address. I was like, for God's sake, I'm telling you that I want to be there. And you are telling me, no, that's not the place that you want to go. This is, Jesus is the taxi driver. In the end, what I did, I say, okay, I'm not going to discuss with this guy. Just pay the fare and just walk away. And in the end, he was complaining, but you're not going to give me a tip. And I did not bother even to discuss that, because I say I'm going to walk half a block with a lot of freight just because you are stubborn and you do not want to drive your car, I don't know, 100 meters more. And then, of course, and why I'm making this, bringing again this different type of analogy, because I can tell you that even if you do all the information, you're going to find some type of people that are going to argue even if the data is clear. Like even in the case of a taxi, you put in the app the address, the number that you want to go, and it might be something, of course, maybe the app was not fully updated. Sometimes that happens. There's also some lag of distance because of the location, so on. But then I tell him, hey, but that's there. And he starts to argue why it's not there. Because instead of listening to me, he was trying to say that he was right. Of course, this is already another communication issue that you are going to face. But if you are facing that, and sometimes people do that they argue because the sake of arguing, because they want to be right, that's already another challenge that you need to tackle. That then, of course, there's different ways that you need to try to overcome, understanding their perspectives, saying that you are not trying to blame that. But I can tell you, if you are not taking care of this curse of knowledge, then it's going to be very messy. Because first of all, people will not get the information that you're trying to send. People are not going to understand the communication that you're trying to send there. And on top of that, they already want to discuss it because they are going to be wanting to be right. So in the end, it ends up that you are discussing something that's completely different. It's like if you're trying to discuss a book with one person, but you're not even talking about the same book. Saying you are telling someone about the end of a booking or about a specific page, And this person is simply talking about another book, and he's trying to argue why your conclusion is not correct. But if those books are different, of course you are never going to end this discussion. There's no chance that you are going to reach a common ground to align in something. And this is something that we are going to see a lot. And if you have been working with project, or if you have been relating with people, I'm sure that you are going to be able to find those kinds of things. Maybe with your parents, maybe your brothers, with your friends, with your partners, or whoever. And the curse of knowledge is always there in all the occasions. So, and of course, I'm not going to discuss what you do in your personal life. That's not my goal here. That's why I'm focusing on the project management part. But I'm pretty sure you've seen this kind of stuff there. So acknowledge that the curse of knowledge exists, and start to look for ways how you can close those gaps, because that's going to help you to progress you at your project. And bigger the project that you have, more people that you're going to have in the team, I think bigger, if you can say like that, the curse of knowledge will be. Well, just to give you, uh, it's a very mathematical example, but if you think about the curse of knowledge happens when you have two people, right? Then you have one communication channel. The thing is, the number of communication channels increase if you increase the number of people that you have in your project. So if you have 10 people in your team, including yourself, this is a formula to calculate the potential number of communication channels. Then you have 45 different communication channels, meaning that you have 45 possibilities of people talking with each other, with those 10 different team members talking with each other in different ways. And can you imagine that you have this curse of knowledge there, and then you have something that's very nice from this childhood. If you have what we called in Portuguese, and the name of the play was phone without wires, of course. In the 80s, that was something that was not common. Nowadays, no cell phone has wires anymore. But basically, the idea is you're going to tell a message in the beginning of a line. Then you might have 5 or 6 people. Every person there will say something what they understand of the message. In the end, you ask the last person to explain what they get there. In general, those messages are very different. Why? Because there's all those different gaps into communication, how you are going to say something. Maybe that's the curse of knowledge. You say something, the person has a different knowledge, a different background, will understand it a different way. The next time he communicates with another one, it will be a different way. And then the message is completely different. And that's why it's important for you as a project manager to keep the team aligned on that. And that's why it's so important. More team members you have in a project, more complex it gets, because more those gaps into communication will be there and will be interacting with each other, creating different types of information. That's why it's very important for you as a project manager to make this as clear as possible, and if you understand the roadblocks that you have in this communication, that also helps you to understand how you can improve it. Curse of knowledge is one, size of the team is the other one. What's the easiest way to try to convey the same information for the same people? If you have 5 people working in one team, instead of talking with each other individually, put everyone in a room if you have it, because nowadays we have global teams, and a lot of times we need to do it virtually. But put everyone in the same meeting room online and talk about it. That's how you're going to drive alignment. And being aware of that, you as a project manager, you need to kind of incentivize, or you need to challenge a bit, to push a bit the team to make sure that the communication is clear. As I mentioned, the example of the test engineer. Ask questions, repeat it. Say, ask someone, do you agree with that? Do you see in the same way? And then you start to overcome those gaps. And always being aware, of course, that are going to be all types of different gaps, but more you are aware of that, more you can work to make sure your team has a clear goal, has a clear target that everyone is putting their efforts in the same direction, in putting their efforts to make sure that you can achieve the same goal there. So this is very important, and of course, this is one of the things that you must know if you really want to improve the communication to your project. I hope you like the content. Make sure that here you like this video, because that helps me to understand the value of the content I'm creating here. Make sure you share this video with people that needs to improve their communication, with people that needs to be aware about the curse of knowledge, and also make sure that you share this with your project team, because if everyone is aware about the curse of knowledge, everyone can work together to overcome this challenge. Then it gets much more fun to work in a team. If you, again, make sure you follow my channel, because I'm always releasing new content every week. There's new stuff there in all different types of topics to help you to succeed as a project manager. Also make sure that you also follow my Instagram, because there I share smaller pieces of content that you can see daily if you want. I also have a Q&A box that's open every day, where you can ask all types of questions with project management, where I share more information and how I can help you to be a successful project manager. Of course, if you have questions, you can put here in the comments of this video. You can send me the Q&A box on Instagram. I'm here to support you, because if your goal is to develop your project management skills, if your goal is to build your project management career there, my goal is to support you in this journey. Thank you very much, and see you soon. Bye.